so I figured I could take the time to film my TKGa Basics 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 class. I took this course early in 2025, and it was really just to kind of prepare myself for other classes that I wanted to take with TKGa. It would very highly recommended to start with this class, even if you're an experienced knitter. They go over just mistakes that you aren't able to see or you don't know about. I learned quite a bit of things about how I knit through this course, and I've been knitting for over 20 years. So it's definitely worth it. The TKGs have they have mini courses that are really focused on finishing techniques or color work techniques, but then they'll have things that are a little bit more advanced where the basics goes over quite a few things. They have a taming tension one that I'm doing and just mailed off lesson 2. They have all sorts of ones. And I think the courses can vary anywhere from, I think like $75 to $100. Don't quote me on it there. Once you become a member, they just have a list of classes that are correspondence classes, and you go from there. So I'm going to turn the phone around and we're going to go through the 3 lessons associated with Basics, Basics, Basics. And I'm not going to share any of the instructions or the paperwork on them just because they are for the course themselves, and they actually might even be outdated. I know that they have been doing a lot of revamping of their courses, so I don't want to share information that's wrong and outdated. So come along with me. So you are first set to make a test or a sample swatch where you take the yarn that you will be using for the project. For my project, I used Ella Ray Classic Wool in this kind of tan color. The yarn has to be very neutral in tone. It can't be variegated, no novelty yarn, no speckles or anything. It just has to be very basic wool. So you knit a few rows of stockinette to determine with one needle size, and then you either increase or decrease to determine what needle size you need to meet gauge for the course. So in this instance, I am a loose knitter, and if I remember correctly, this is 8, 7, and 6, and 6 is what I have to use to meet gauge. So these with the swatches for the TKGa Basics lesson 1. This lesson is all about increases. The swatch instructions have you knit a certain format. It can be stockinette, it can be garter, you can have yarn overs, and then you are just doing your increases with the instructions. And you have to answer a few basic questions of how does the increase affect the overall look, which one looks better, do you notice any variances between the increases? And as you can see by the red thread, I did make an error on 2 of them where I did the make one or the rapid mirrored bar. I did them in the incorrect manner. So she put in a little bit of red yarn, made a note of it. I did not have to redo the swatch and resubmit. It is not like the master's hand knitter or professional hand knitter where you have to redo until it's acceptable. This is really just to shed the light on this is what these increases do. Here's where you should apply them to have a better looking garment. So lesson 1, all about increases. And here are all the swatches for lessons 2 for basics. This lesson is completely focused on decreases. And the swatches are a little bit out of order just to fit within the frame, but you're focusing on your knit 2 together, SSK and knit 2 together blends, double decreases, central double decreases, decreasing purlwise and blended decreases. So the blended decreases are really to show you more of that full fashion and when to use an SSK versus knit two together. If you are wanting it to kind of blend in with maybe a shoulder seam or a neckline, you want it to blend, you don't want it to kind of pop out. And you can kind of see from the double decrease, like these ones are, because you're actually rapidly decreasing, and it actually creates and elevates the yarn a little bit. And here on the slip knit purl or knit slip purl, it elevates the decrease. So it's not as smooth. And there are always purposes and ways to put, or reasons to have specific decreases in. They all give you different techniques, or the techniques give you different kind of appearances or serve different functions. Some decreases can provide structure as well. So it's really, designers use them, and this is just getting you used to seeing and actually being able to apply them as you would want to if you wanted to make a sweater or a hat or something of that nature, where you didn't have a pattern. You just wanted to kind of, I have the basic concept, I'm going to make it. And so these are all your decreases. And here are the swatches for Basics 3. This one is a little different. You don't really have a swatch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have a specific stitch that you are working on, and you are determining a gauge. So you've got to make stockinette garter seed stitch, lace, cables, and then the extra credit is you design your own. And what you do is you actually knit the swatch, block it, and then you actually run in some contrasting yarn, which for me is this green, and you measure the gauge. So you have to pull out a ruler, there's a worksheet, and it tells you to measure from one place to the other. You mark those and you determine what your gauge is for this swatch. And you can see by the bright yellow, I did mark my my lines incorrect on 2 of the swatches. And again, you get feedback, ways to improve, and move on. The extra credit one was kind of fun. You get to determine what type of swatch you actually want to create. And it can be lace or cables or knit purl patterns, and you just pull out a stitch dictionary and you kind of write up a basic swatch or a basic pattern for the swatch. This one was a eyelet, and I can't remember what this part is. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it just came out of the Vogue knitting thing. It was a lot of fun. I used Pattern Genius to kind of map the swatch and make a pattern out of it. So it was neat to see that side of it. All of my swatches are rough. They've been put in a bag for a bit. So I just pull them out when I need to reference them, but I don't have them nice and washed and blocked. Well, I hope that little brief introduction to the basics helped you and has informed you whether or not you want to do some TKG courses. I highly recommend them. They go in it at a very education-based process. They are not focused on, oh, I got you, I'm a better knitter than you, and put you down. No way, not at all. I loved working with Arenda Holiday on this. She gave me some really good advice to steer me in my next step, which was to do the Taming Tension course before I prepare to do the professional hand knitter. There isn't a focus on you have to knit this way and you have to do it the way that we're telling you, or you aren't knitting correctly. That's not a thing for them. Are you getting gauge? Are you able to form purl, form the different stitches, then, knit a purl, increase, decrease, yarn over, all those, are you able to do that and it look the best that you want it to be? So I would strongly encourage, if you want to elevate your knitting, or if there's an area where you're stumped on, there are wonderful classes. The other kind of thing that it really does, and I think that one of the challenges we're in now, is if you think prior to, the 50s and 40s and prior, patterns or knitting patterns were not size inclusive. They didn't even have sizes on them. Sometimes they didn't have gauge, they didn't have final measurements. It was just knit this until you get this length or this diameter, and follow the whatever pattern, whatever pattern or stitch design there is, until you made the sweater. So you had to rely on your knowledge and experience, which would have come traditionally through training, sorry, not training, maybe your elementary or middle school classes, learning with your friends or family, but there wasn't a focus on doing it in a very specific manner to ensure that it was not proper, but well formed. So right now there's a lot of kind of heated debate about whether or not you should support designers that are size inclusive, and I'm not going to get into that. I actually think that there's a difference because the reality is that while some of them aren't size inclusive, there's actually not a lot of good patterns out there that are suited for men. They can be unisex, but they are not actually shaped well for men. So that's a whole other thing. And I don't really want to get into it. But what I will say is that these courses will give you the skill set to say, I want to make this sweater, I want to make this piece. It doesn't come, and it's not graded to the size that I want, but it gives you the skill set by learning what the increases, decreases do, the shaping does, finishing techniques, tension techniques, all those. There's a class on almost everything. It's awesome. It gives you the skills to say, this pattern doesn't include my size, or it doesn't include the size I want. But I have the skills to make the modifications to get that desire, or to take one of the millions of, or not millions, but one of the many, many books on, take these, Elizabeth Zimmerman, Barbara Walker, I think Ann Budd, all those say, here's a formula to make yourself a sweater or pants or a dress or whatever you wanted to do. Not pants, skirt, something along those lines. And you have the skill set for it now because they've elevated your understanding and your knowledge of why these stitches interact the way they do. So I strongly encourage anyone interested in kind of furthering their knowledge. There are a million YouTube videos out there and lots of TikTok, lots of Instagram, but they aren't always well informed and they're not always correct. So that's one of the things that you have to learn, is you have to actually learn, which TKGa does. You learn how to learn about knitting. That's one of the things that they teach you, is it gives you a list of skill sets to build on, and they'll let you know, here's some improvements, here's some ways to fix this issue that you have a concern with. For me, right now I'm doing the taming tension, and I have voiced one of the challenges I have is I'm a loose knitter, and I always have to drop down at least 2 needle sizes. So when I want to knit socks, I usually have to knit socks on DK weight at US 1s. If I want to do fingering weight, you're talking double zeros, and that's painful. It's not comfortable to knit. I don't like it. But this course has kind of said, here's some ways that you could achieve, hopefully, and test, oh, which I just have to do, and I've got to get the setup and try it to be able to knit fingering weight yarn for socks on something that's more reasonable, like a one or a two. And so I can choose to do that, or I cannot. And I can go forth and say, all right, with the way I knit, I can either try to change the way I knit, which is a very big challenge. I could go to where I'm picking yarn, which made me have really dense gauge. But is it comfortable? No. For me, it gave me really, really bad hand fatigue, and I just there's no way in heck I am going to finish a pair of socks regardless of the needle size and the yarn size by doing picking. It just is not comfortable. I get too fatigue of hands and cramps. So for me, I can make the choice to say DK weight is a good sock weight for me. I'm happy to move forward, and I'm okay with knitting on ones when it comes to that. The other thing that was kind of helped me, and I had Arinda Holiday help me on it, is I explained what my intentions are on my continuing education for knitting. And she was a sounding box to say, this is what I want to do and where I want to go in my knitting life or career, and what's the next path that I should take. What would you recommend? And she was wonderful about it. She said, if you feel you have a attention issue and you want to improve, take the Taming Tension class. You'll learn things about your knitting that you didn't know about. You learn things about ways to improve your technique. That, one of the things I'm working on is edge tension, and there were 9 different techniques that were, here's your resources, here's links to articles or YouTube videos that have been vetted by the team or by the TKG folks team, and they're known, and they're trustworthy, I guess is the best way to say. They're not just some arbitrary person that said, oh, this is how I do it. It could be wrong if you're getting it off of, TikTok or Instagram. What are their credentials to know that that's the right way to do it or what the outcome will be? So that's one of the things that I've learned from it, and it's helped me improve my edge tension through testing the 8 or 9 different techniques for it. And I now can put that into use on future projects. My then goal after this is to do the professional hand knitting series, which is really just to find the way to perfect your end results. It focuses on gauge, tension, finishing techniques, all of that, and molds it together. I don't necessarily want to do the master hand knitting. It is similar in terms of swatching and a little bit of design elements, but I don't really want to do the research. I'm not interested in that. I find it fascinating, but I have, they're one there, but I've got almost 8-year-old triplets. I don't have the time to jump in and focus that much on knitting and at an academic level. For me, I just want what I knit to be the best that it can be, and these courses have definitely provided me that tool. So I'd highly recommend it. Once I do finish the Taming Tension course, I have one more lesson to do after this. I will again follow up with a video, and I thank you for joining me.